First of all, let's talk about the differential between the shutters and these gates that have been destroyed. The shutters they were erected illegally by Mr. Henderson and have subsequently been removed. So that's the shutters. After their removal, we about a week or so later, we found that the gates that form part of the central part of the weir that goes from Lake Albert into the Tatton Drain were also destroyed. Now we don't know when they were destroyed, whether they were destroyed before or after, we've got no idea. But basically that has sabotaged the lake. In other words, it has prevented the lake from filling and potentially has caused major problems with the filling of that lake. Now we've worked extremely hard for quite some time to find a solution for this lake, and to find that these gates were deliberately destroyed, removed and thrown onto the ground is really concerning, and I'm outraged by that. What is also of a concern is the community have known about the destruction of these gates for quite some time, for several weeks now, and yet the silence from the community has been deafening. And I just don't know why. It appears that the General Manager and myself are the only people who appear to be outraged by the removal of these gates. And that is really of a major concern to me. The gates have been put back at a cost, a community cost, so the integrity of the lake has been restored. So, as I mentioned, I'm outraged by the fact that these gates were deliberately removed, and it's a separate incident to the shutters. So I'm concerned about that. As far as the shutters were concerned, we, and I think you've been supplied with a letter from the General Manager, we did ask for leniency concerning and imposing a fine for those illegal erection of those gutters, and you've got that letter. We did ask for leniency, but however it's not a Wagga City Council's decision. It's the Water Authority that makes that decision, the Water Policing Authority, NRA, who makes that decision. So we asked for leniency, but at the same time they decided to go ahead and issue a fine. Now, the destruction of these gates is a separate matter, far more serious, because it's a criminal offence, and if somebody who is found and convicted of that criminal offence will have a criminal record for the rest of their life. And that is of a major concern. And I appeal to anybody who may know who removed these, who destroyed these gates, to come forward and let the police know, because it's a major problem to destroy Wagga City Council infrastructure. Now, I'm happy to answer
Conkey, we know, and it's been well publicised, that Mick Henderson was responsible for the erection of those shutters originally.
Yes.
Given this is also relating to Lake Albert, has Mr Henderson been spoken to in relation of the destruction of
you'd need to speak to Mr Henderson concerning that. The police, I understand, did make some inquiries, but you'd need to speak to the police about that as well. We just don't know who did it, but the people out there in the community would know. So I really encourage them to go and speak to the police.
It's almost acts of vigilantism that are occurring down there. How does Council feel about the community taking this matter into their own hands?
Look, we are working on a solution for the lake, so it's really disheartening to see such a thing has happened. As I said, it's a sabotage. This lake has been sabotaged. The lake, with these gates down, cannot fill. And so for whatever reason they were removed, I don't know the reason why they were removed, but they were destroyed and the lake could never fill. So that has sabotaged the lake, and that is of major concern.
We've had some major rainfall events over the last couple of weeks. How much water do you think has been lost from Lake Albert as a result of this vandalism?
Fortunately, I don't think any water has been lost, but if we had a major event that we had sort of 10 or 12 years ago where the lake was filled to capacity, it would not be able to fill. The water would just flow straight out of the lake into Marshall's Creek. So we've been very fortunate that the rain events have topped up the lake, but haven't got to the stage where these gates have come into play.
Assist with filling the lake to remove the gates that effectively empty the lake. It seems actions of what happened previously with Mr Henderson.
That's why I can't understand why there's not community outrage concerning this, because the community knows about this. Members of the Wagga Boat Club know about this. Councillors know about this, and yet it appears that very few people are taking it seriously. And as I mentioned, I'm outraged. The General Manager is outraged. We have fixed the issue. At what cost, I don't know at this stage, but we'll give that cost to the community when we finally have those invoices in.
It's just not easy to move those gates either, so this is going to take at least a couple of people maybe to lift them out.
Definitely. So it's not just a couple of kids riding their bikes, kicking these gates aside. Some serious machinery is being used, and serious equipment is being used to dismantle these gates.
Do you know how far progressed the police investigation into this matter is?
No, I don't know.
When were they repaired and were they?
They've been back for a couple of weeks now, I understand. So when we found out about it, we did put a temporary measure in there. So we put some sandbags in there just in case we had a serious rain event that would have filled the gate, fill the lake to capacity. So we put a temporary measure in place, and that was a sandbagging option. And then we had an engineer have a look at that structure, and he advised us on how we should re-erect those gates. That has happened. We put the gates back in, and those sandbanks, those sandbags have been removed.
Speculate, but we want someone to the gates off the lake. Is there any advantage to anyone for the water that flows through?
There's certainly, as I mentioned, water flows from the lake out through these gates into the tap and drain. So if we had this pipe that we're trying to get to pump water from Lake Albert, the water would have been pumped from Lake Albert straight out through these gates.
Why do you think whoever did it?
I've got no idea. That's and somebody knows the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that, but somebody out there does.
And why do you think that these people in the community who knew about it? Why did no one come forward to tell council?
That's a good question. We had to find out ourselves. And we fixed the problem after we found out about it. As I said, we put a temporary measure in there to start with, and then we fixed the problem permanently with the permanent erection of these gates.
Obviously, this situation is set against the backdrop of council speaking to New South Wales Water Minister Melinda Pavey about a longer-term solution to Lake Albert's water levels. I understand you have until the end of February to put in that submission.
That's
How
correct.
is that progressing?
Look, the General Manager started on that the day after we met with the Minister, so he's been working on that since the day after we met with the Minister, and we're working with the State Government concerning that agreement. And as you rightly point out, that agreement will be in the hands of the Minister by the end of this month, and then it'll be up to the Minister to decide where we go from there. But we're hopeful and fingers crossed that we can come up with a permanent solution, and that will be a permanent solution to the lake.
I know it's previously been discussed at other media opportunities, the water accounting and how it's all going to work, but we need to see the building of a pipeline, I guess, to enable that to happen, which isn't going to be a quick process. Can you just detail, I guess, the timeline and the logistics that are going to be involved in seeing this vision come to fruition?
Look, I can't give you a timeline because there's funding involved concerning this. We understand it's several $1 million, so we'd need to secure funding for that. But you're right, the infrastructure would include a pipeline, and that pipeline would travel from the river up, possibly up Marshalls Creek, or will be up Marshalls Creek into the river. The timeline, I don't know.
But we're looking potentially probably years, because there's going to have to be environmental assessments, as you say, funding secured and so forth. It's not something that's going to happen by next summer.
It won't happen overnight, but I'd like to hope that the solution will be sooner rather than later.
How confident are you in getting either state or federal government support for this plan?
Look, we have tremendous support from politicians, including the Deputy Premier and also the Water Minister. We have great support from our local member as well. We've got great support from West Fang. So I'm hopefully we can convince the bureaucrats and the government that this is a positive way forward to find a permanent solution to our lake problems.
You have tremendous support from members of the state government. Why has it taken so long?
Look, there's a lot of issues involved with water security. It's a very complicated situation. So, but we're working towards it, and hopefully we can come up with that permanent solution that we're all looking for.
Freddie, you mentioned the
Are we talking $4 to $5 million possibly? Yes. Okay.
What would be the advantage to anyone of removing these gates? It's quite a big job. That water's just going to destroy it. Is there any rhyme or reason?
Yeah, look, I think it was probably done just with an angle grinder, grinding off the bolts that attached the metal plates that formed the gates. If I was guessing, it was done at the same time as the shutters were put on, because by removing the weir, it meant that any water captured by the shutters would flow back into the lake at a much lower level than if the weir's in place. The thing that we were incredibly disappointed about was that we found the shutters by chance, and they were removed within 24 hours, but people were happy to sit there in silence, knowing if there was a rainfall event that started to fill the lake, it would only fill to the point where the weir previously held water, and then it would all run down Marshall's Creek. Most people in this community want the lake to be fixed. There's a few of us that obviously are looking at some pleasure in ensuring that it's not reaching its top level.
So there must have been a few people that know about this. So is it either willful blindness, or is there some kind of conspiracy to make sure that those gates are...
I can't speculate on what the motivations are behind people disabling the weir. I know there was a councillor and a member of the community on Friday called for me to make an apology for doing something that I haven't done. Can I say I've handed out the letter requesting leniency to the media today? That was sent within 24 hours of the shutters being identified and then corrected, and you'll see in that letter requesting leniency I've said to the regulator that's responsible for regulating it and ultimately issuing the fine that this community is frustrated, and they're disappointed that state and local government haven't delivered a solution. So hopefully people will see that as a very frank and sincere request for leniency in that circumstance. In relation to the weir though, which we discovered more than a week later, that's just straight out stupidity at the expense of everyone in the community. Would we be blamed as well if we had a rainfall event and we weren't aware of the gates being removed because we didn't fix them? It's a no-win situation for us. I'd rather the community focus on the solution that we're trying to negotiate with the state government and have been for much more than a year. Again, there are elements of the community that keep saying we're frustrated that council and government hasn't done anything. What's not in that story is that there's deathly silence from all of these groups in relation to what the fix is. It's just go and do something. And we have been doing something for more than 12 months, and that is almost reaping fruits now after a lengthy submission in the beginning. We've submitted reports from consultants, we've submitted reports from fire carriers, we've got a QC advice to back up one of our arguments at the end of last year that came in as late as the 23rd of December. We've matched up against all of the senior bureaucrats in DPI Water and walked out with the result that we wanted, and yet we come back to Wagga and some people in the community are disabling the weir. It's extraordinary. But I will say, and I'll say it very clearly, if anyone wants to go in and damage one of our sporting fields, McDonald's Park, our effluent treatment plants, any other infrastructure that we have, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to report that to the police, just the same as I did on this occasion.
I'm a bit confused about something you said
Yep.
there. In terms of the stakeholders and groups, are you saying that they've never given you any sort of solution or anything, like submitted anything to you?
The solution that we're pursuing at the moment is solely a solution that has been developed in the council. It's a strategy that we have researched in the legislation and found and identified and articulated. The meetings that we've had with the community have largely been sitting down and the community telling us that they want a fix for it, but there's no solution. So the person that apparently was protesting the lack of action by putting up shutters and whoever the group was that decided they'd protest by disabling the ability of the lake to fill, that they aren't the people that are coming forward and saying this is the solution. It's not coming from them. The exception that I will acknowledge is Gary Williams has been very useful and very accommodating in providing history on the lake, and he's my go-to person to get the historical information, and he's been directly has been a direct contributor right up to the last meeting we had with the Premier in providing us with information.
How dangerous is this almost mob mentality and an us versus them? Will we ever get a solution to Lake Albert's water issues when there continues to be this divide, I guess, between community and council?
Look, it obviously was touched upon in the meeting with the Minister, and I'd like to think from the discussion at that meeting that state government is viewing it as a relatively small number of people who don't know what they're doing and therefore are not placing any weight on what they're doing to compromise what we're doing. So out of the meeting last week, notwithstanding what happened was discussed in very brief terms, in that it doesn't reflect the broader Wagga community, it doesn't reflect the wish of the people to have a fix with state government, and it was acknowledged as having that little weight, which is a good thing. But the more things that are damaged out there, the more things that are compromised in breach of either the NRA law or the New South Wales criminal law, the less the state government will be inclined, I'm sure, to turn a blind eye. Everyone needs to bear in mind what we're asking for here is a solution that's not consistent with state government policy. We're asking them to depart from state government policy and give us a solution which we believe we've justified. And at the last meeting, the Minister said, I do think you've given me an argument that I can now review an agreement on, and I'd ask you to prepare that agreement. The next day we sent the draft agreement to the bureaucrats in DPI Water, and I've got a meeting with the DPI Water bureaucrats on Thursday for most of the day to hopefully polish up what I've sent already and come out with something that will hit our deadline of the end of February. Sorry.
Do these weird dates work? There are members of the community that believe that they haven't worked for 10 years and that they haven't operated.
Well, I've only been here for 3 years myself, so I've not had the pleasure of seeing the work because the lake hasn't been full for a very long time. And maybe that's right. Maybe we're all overreacting and someone's taken them off as a stunt and they actually don't perform a function. But I find it hard to believe that that would be right. They seem to have been built for a very deliberate and specific purpose to hold water in the lake.
But is there some sort of evidence that they do work, I suppose?
Well, on staff we have people that are charged with managing the lake, and they're the people that said we need to get the gates back up or the lake will drain water. So I'd prefer to back those good people rather than back whoever it was that took the gates down.
And you mentioned as well that this was reported to police about a week after the other shutters. Is that the case? Have you heard that this has been reported to police the day after the other shutters?
I can only comment on what our actions were, and we weren't aware of it for at least a week after the shutters were discovered, and it was myself that rang up the police that we'd asked not to do anything and said, can you go and have a look at the gates on the weir, which is in a different location, because they've been damaged as well and removed.
Were any stakeholders notified at that point as well? People like, as you say, Gary, were they notified that this is a good thing that they could help you find whoever did this?
I haven't spoken to anyone about that, no.
Do you know how the police investigation is going?
No.
You mentioned when we spoke on Friday that you were thinking of contacting the police again to get a bit of an update. Did you end up speaking?
I did speak to the police officer and he indicated that the police had spoken to an individual, but I don't believe there's anything moving beyond that. But it's up. I don't wish to be involved in the police investigation either. Although if they do find someone, I have a bill for fixing the gates that I'd love to give to somebody.
And Peter, you touched on it before, but if you could just reiterate for us, in terms of the allegation that you did contact police asking them to prosecute after you held the process saying that you wouldn't, is that true?
No, I asked the police not to take any further action on the shutters, and to my knowledge they took no further action on the shutters. When we became aware of the gates a week or so later, I rang the police and said that someone has destroyed the infrastructure at that weir and disabled the weir. We'd like you to investigate that.
And just to clarify, what was the damage bill for the damage to the gates?
We haven't got a final number yet, but it would be in the thousands of dollars by the time we've paid for the new gates and the expert advice to connect those gates to an old concrete structure. It'd be in the thousands of dollars.